Every year for the last couple years, I've made a video explaining how every single NFL team can win the Super Bowl for that particular season. And guess what? This year is no different, even if I am a little late. But you know what they say, better late than never. So let's get into it. The Arizona Cardinals. After years of being bullied for being a tiny little boy, Kyler Murray decides he's going to wear high heels during game. This will finally give him the ability to see over his offensive lineman when he throws, and it will also make defenders very hesitant to tackle him because they don't want to look homophobic or potentially transphobic. This leads the Cardinals to going 20-0 and winning the first Super Bowl in their franchise's history. The video continues right after this short break. Before I begin, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's video, DraftKings. Well, everybody, I want to say congratulations. We have done it. We are officially into the NFL season. I know it was a long and strenuous offseason, but you guys are all heroes and we've made it. And one of the great things about the NFL season is that every single fan base every year feels like they have a chance at winning the Lombardi Trophy. But for right now, I'm going to tell you about a great offer that DraftKings has for you. New customers who bet just $5 will get $300 instantly in bonus bets and also $200 off Sunday ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. All you got to do is download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use my promo code Barry. And folks, let me tell you, if there's one thing that DraftKings and YouTube TV have in common, it's that they're both worth it. And don't forget about Sunday ticket. So what are you waiting for? Once again, new customers bet just $5 and get $300 instantly in bonus bets and $200 off Sunday ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Don't forget to download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use my promo code Barry. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Atlanta Falcons. Now that the Michael Penix Jr. era has officially started in Atlanta, the Falcons decide to use his last name to their advantage. Because Penix's last name sounds like penis, the Falcons players are instructed to call him Michael Penis Jr. This will also cause their opponents to laugh so hard they won't be able to focus on their defensive assignments, which allows the Falcons to average a staggering 70 points per game. Unfortunately, because the Falcons defense is so bad, despite their offensive dominance, the Falcons still finish 12-5 and have to go on a wild card run. And then Michael Penis gets injured early in the first playoff game, leading to Kirk Cousins taking over. But the magical bond of Cousins' penis will be too strong for any other team to break, as they just keep pounding their way through opponents all the way until they penetrate into the end zone enough times to win their first Lombardi Trophy. Baltimore Ravens. Finally tired of losing in the playoffs every year and desperate for his second Super Bowl ring, John Harbaugh tells talented rookie Mike Green to pretend that the quarterbacks are all helpless women in bathrooms. Green, who's been accused of sexual assault twice, then taps into his evil side and finishes the NFL season with a record 120 sacks. Once the Ravens get to the playoffs, still not fully confident in Lamar, Harbaugh re-signs Ray Rice, who ends up running for over 500 yards and 7 touchdowns in a single postseason to finally get Lamar Jackson over the hump, while Ray Lewis stabs Commissioner Roger Goodell with a white suit on at the trophy ceremony. Allegedly. Buffalo Bills. Patrick Mahomes dies. Carolina Panthers. Bryce Young, instead of trying to get bigger and taller, decides to lean into his short stature and wears a booster seat and a binky in his mouth at all times to try and get defenders to feel sorry for him and to make him feel like a baby. Defensive players don't have it in them to hit a baby, so they allow Bryce Young to score touchdowns on every single play with his binky in mouth. In addition to billionaire owner David Tepper paying off the referees, the Cardinals waltz to a perfect 20-0 season and their first Super Bowl in franchise history, but unfortunately, Bryce Young would become the first Super Bowl MVP to be too short to ride the rides at Walt Disney World. Chicago Bears. First-year head coach wonderkin Ben Johnson finds out how to get the best out of his second-year zesty quarterback Caleb Williams. One of Williams' biggest weaknesses as a rookie was taking sacks. He took 68 of them. But Johnson and Williams come up with a plan where anytime a defender comes within too close of Williams, he'll bend over and shoot glitter out of his ass into the faces of oncoming defenders, which leads to the first 4,000-yard season by any quarterback in Bears history. The Bears then finally win their second Lombardi Trophy and first since 1985, and on the podium, Caleb Williams then shoves the entire Lombardi Trophy up his butthole. Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals actually hire defensive coaches who tell their players to tackle the other team before they can get into the end zone. But this is only one step. The second and most important step is that Zach Taylor reminds Joe Burrow that late in close games when the team is losing, they're supposed to score points and not punt or turn the ball over on downs, much like they did in Super Bowl 56 and the 2022 AFC Championship game. Once these two minor issues are solved, the Bengals end up winning Super Bowl 60 by a score of 3-0. Cleveland Browns. I honestly got nothing, man. I think all of the 31 teams would have to die in plane crashes for this piece of shit franchise to win anything. Dallas Cowboys. Jerry Jones dies. Denver Broncos. After a long and fruitful one-year career in the NFL, 55-year-old Bo Nix finally calls it quits, which leaves a hole at the quarterback position. Desperate, Sean Payton reaches to the legend himself, John Elway, to come out of retirement to lead the Broncos back to the promised land. Elway then plays the entire season in every game super intoxicated and runs over opponents using his golf cart. With Elway in a golf cart being unstoppable, the Broncos coast to their fourth Super Bowl victory in franchise history and reclaim their pride from the Kansas City Chiefs. Detroit Lions. Coming off of the most successful regular season in franchise history, the Lions do much of the same shit to once again finish with a great record and get the 1 seed in the NFC. But in order to avoid another early playoff disappointment, the Lions hired Jared Goff's super hot wife to stand on the sideline and show off her gigantic mommy milkers to distract defenses. This finally allows the Lions to get to their first Super Bowl ever and win their first Super Bowl, as Jared Goff gets named Super Bowl MVP while being breastfed by his wife. Green Bay Packers. Unless Micah Parsons is somehow the greatest quarterback of all time in secret, I don't see the Packers winning anything. But I will say this, and I mentioned this before in other videos, the only times Favre and Aaron Rodgers won Super Bowls with the Packers were in their 6th season at age 27. And guess what? Right now, Jordan Love is in his 6th season, and he's going to be 27 by the time the playoffs start. This is all you have to hope for if you're a cheesehead. Houston Texans. The Texans will win the Super Bowl if they can somehow successfully lobby to Roger Goodell that the only teams they need to play in the postseason are fellow AFC South teams, including the Super Bowl, even though the Super Bowl is supposed to be between two different conferences. Goodell, feeling sorry for Houston after Hurricane Harvey nearly a decade ago, grants their wish and allows the Texans to play all 3 of their shitty divisional opponents in the postseason, which leads to their first Super Bowl ever. Indianapolis Colts. After starting the season 0-3 with Daniel Jones under center, the Colts are forced to go back to Anthony Richardson. In a stroke of genius, head coach Shane Steichen tells Anthony Richardson to throw the ball as hard as he can at his opponent's heads. Knowing how inaccurate Richardson is, all of his passes instead end up hitting his opponents in the testicles, causing their testicles to explode, ending their careers. After doing this 11 times per game, the Chiefs end up winning every game by matter of forfeit because the opponent runs out of players to trot onto the field. This new strategy, the ball breaker strategy, ends up leading the Colts to 10 straight Super Bowl championships and cementing Anthony Richardson's status as the greatest quarterback of all time. Jacksonville Jaguars. Sick and tired of all the losing, billionaire owner Shad Khan decides to sign a bunch of actual Jaguars in place of the players, and he teaches all the Jaguars to run into the end zone with the football. Because of the Jaguars' speed and how ferocious they are, including ripping out the necks and jugulars of several opponents, the Jaguars become the most feared and dominant team in NFL history, waltzing their way to a 20-0 Super Bowl season. Unfortunately, it will only be a 1-year run because Commissioner Goodell, being a big poopy head, will outlaw the use of animals on the field as players after the season is over. But what a run it was. What a run it was. Kansas City Chiefs. There's a couple things. 1, Patrick Mahomes stay healthy. 2, don't play the Philadelphia Eagles in the Super Bowl. If you can achieve those 2 things, they might be able to win their 4th ring in 7 years. And if that doesn't work, Taylor Swift can just tell her billions of psychotic fans to threaten Roger Goodell's life or something like that if he doesn't allow the Chiefs to win, and Travis Kelce to win his 4th ring. Really his 5th ring if you include the engagement ring he got. Get it? Because when people get engaged, they give each other rings. It's really very funny and creative. I'm so fucking amazing. Las Vegas Raiders. New minority owner Tom Brady pays for every single player to get plastic surgery to look like him. Therefore, once the game starts, the referees refuse to call any penalties against the Raiders in fear of invoking the wrath of Tom Brady because they think they're playing and reffing a game with Tom Brady in it. This ingenious plan works until the Super Bowl, when Brady's team falls behind 40-0 entering the 4th quarter, but then somehow miraculously wins the game 42-40 when their opponent literally hands the ball off to them 7 times times in a row in the fourth quarter for 7 consecutive defensive touchdowns to finish the most successful comeback in a game in NFL history. That's how much of a competitor Tom Brady is. Los Angeles Chargers. After having rigorous premarital sex with his new girlfriend, Justin Herbert takes the leap into elite status, wins the AFC West to end the Chiefs' reign of dominance, and ends up carrying the Chargers to their first Super Bowl since 1994. In an ending fit for a Hollywood movie, on the final play of the Super Bowl, Justin Herbert throws a game-winning touchdown pass to returning Charger Keenan Allen to win the Chargers their first ever Super Bowl. However, it's bittersweet, as Justin Herbert's girlfriend Madison Bear tells him that she only dates quarterbacks with 2 Super Bowl wins, which is why she leaves him for Blaine Gabbert. Even in victory, the Chargers will always find a way to charger. Los Angeles Rams. Due to Matthew Stafford's oncurring back problems, they eventually have to shut him down for the season, as his ruthless regimen of non-stop back shots just was not enough. This causes the team to turn to 2-time Super Bowl champion and 5-time Sexiest Man of the Year award winner, in my mind, Jimmy Garoppolo. And armed with Sean McVay's genius, Garoppolo makes up and atones for his 2019 Super Bowl loss versus the Chiefs by leading the Rams to a Super Bowl against, you guessed it, the Chiefs. After the game is over, Garoppolo is immediately inducted into the NFL Hall of Fame, becoming the first player to ever do so while still actively playing. Miami Dolphins. Tua suffers another concussion, but this time his brain gets rattled into a particular position that allows him to read defenses at a higher rate and process and diagnose what he's seeing at higher rates than humanly possible. Similar, in a way, to Bradley Cooper's character in Limitless. Anyways, the newly concussed superpowered Tua ends up throwing 80 touchdown passes, an NFL record, with 0 interceptions, saving Mike McDaniel's job and giving the Dolphins their first Super Bowl championship since 1973, when Tricky Dick Nixon was still in office. Minnesota Vikings. In order to appeal and increase ratings among Norwegian NFL fans, Roger Goodell rigs the season that allows the Vikings to win their first ever Super Bowl and finally break the curse of being the best team without a Super Bowl. New England Patriots. Patriots owner Robert Kraft uses his friendship with Roger Goodell for nefarious deeds, promising Goodell several happy endings at his favorite massage parlor in exchange for one more Super Bowl run without Belichick or Brady. Goodell reluctantly agrees, but only if Red Zone will start adding commercials. Once Kraft says this is okay, Goodell gives the go-ahead, and the rest is history. Another global pandemic hits, and everybody except Saints players and coaches die. New York Giants. Much like how he did with Daniel Jones back in 2022, Brian Daboll somehow convinces defenses that Jackson Dart, who will come to be starting after a couple bad games by Russell Wilson, is not a running threat because he's white. And because the defenses underestimate Jackson Dart's running ability, he ends up leading the Giants back to the playoffs, where by some grace of God, they end up winning the Super Bowl, stumbling ass backwards into the Lombardi, just like they did in 2007 and 2011, to continue their march as the biggest fraud franchise and the biggest fake blue blood franchise in the NFL. New York Jets. Yeah, I got nothing, sorry. Philadelphia Eagles. I would come up with some snappy or stupid hypothetical situation, but quite honestly, the Eagles, in order to win the Super Bowl, just really got to keep doing what we're doing. We're a couple plays away from winning 2 of the last 3 Super Bowls. We're the defending Super Bowl champions, as long as Jalen Hurts and Barkley and all the guys from last year offensively stay healthy, and Jalen Carter can avoid spitting on opposing quarterbacks in the playoffs. By the power of the tush push, the Eagles should repeat as champions if healthy. Pittsburgh Steelers. Roger Goodell signs an executive order that any team that finishes 9-8 or 10-7 automatically wins the Super Bowl. And gosh darn it, wouldn't you know it, that's what the Steelers just happen to excel at, and this season will be no different. Aaron Rodgers rides off into the sunset with his second Super Bowl ring to officially cement himself as just as good as Eli Manning. San Francisco 49ers. Honestly, if they're healthy, they have the talent. They just gotta hope that they don't play Kansas City in the Super Bowl again. It also wouldn't hurt if they shoveled all the shit on their sidewalks, on their streets. Seattle Seahawks. Sam Darnold proves that his 2024 season with the Vikings wasn't a fluke, becoming the second straight former Jets draft pick turned Seahawk to revitalize his career in Seattle. Inspired by Dick Hammer's grandson, the Seahawks go on a magical run to the Super Bowl. And in the Super Bowl, a fiercely contested contested battle with Tom Brady's Los Angeles Raiders. The Seahawks trail by 4 with 30 seconds left with the ball on the Raiders' 1-yard line. Unfortunately, Darnold is suddenly struck with mono, forcing himself out of the game. So who do the Seahawks put in at quarterback? That's right, the recently unretired Malcolm Butler. Butler then runs it in for the game-winning score to give the Seahawks their long-awaited second Super Bowl victory. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Buccaneers have a Super Bowl quality offense. Their defense is a little bit questionable, and that's the real thing that's holding them back. But quite honestly, if you want a non-joking take, if the Buccaneers want to win the Super Bowl, they just have to avoid the back-breaking turnovers that they've had in each of the last 2 postseasons. The game-losing interception a couple years ago versus Detroit, and the fumble deep in their own territory last year versus Washington. If they can do that, they'll have a chance to win their first legitimate Super Bowl since 2002. Tennessee Titans. Well, let's look at the bright side. They play in the worst division in the league. Cam Ward looks to be legitimate, I think, maybe, I don't know. But the fact that they play in the worst division in the league means that there's a good chance they'll be able to sneak into the playoffs, and then once they're into the playoffs, they will use their irrelevancy to their advantage, meaning that their playoff opponents will forget who they are and what players they have, and therefore the Titans will sneak up on 4 different teams and win, and Cam Ward will become the first rookie starting quarterback to ever win a Super Bowl as a rookie. Look, I'm trying my best here, okay? Give me a break. The Washington Commanders. Jaden Daniels' helicopter parent mother convinces Commissioner Goodell to make an exemption for her so she can be on the field next to her son during the game. Not wanting to hit an old lady, defenses allow Washington to score on every drive, which is just enough for Washington to overcome their terrible defense, winning the average game by a score of 56-55. Late in the Super Bowl, with the score 88-87, Dan Quinn, fearful of angering Mama Daniels, allows her to kick a game-winning 65-yard field goal to give Washington their first Super Bowl championship since 1991, and also Dan Quinn's first Super Bowl victory in his second try. What was his first try? I don't remember. I really don't remember. It definitely was not traumatizing for me.